So the Tampa Bay Lightning will play the Montreal Canadiens for the 2021 Stanley Cup. It should be a very fun series. Let's just get into talking about it. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to preview just every position group and sort of talk about how it could match up and everything like that. And there's no better way to start when talking about this series than the goaltending. I mean, it should be incredible goaltending. And you look at the numbers between Vasilevskiy and Carey Price, it's nearly identical. Vasilevskiy has a very slight edge in both of the two main categories, goals allowed per game and save percentage. But still, this is a nearly even statistical situation, and it should be really fun to watch, especially when you factor in the fact that these are two goalies who play so different stylistically. Carey Price is very much the positional goaltender. He puts himself in the right spot. He doesn't have to, go left to right and go post to post too often because he's already where he has to be. Meanwhile, Vasilevskiy might not be as good technique-wise, but he can get over there anyways because he's so athletic. He's so flexible. He moves around so much. He's not quite like a Marc-Andre Fleury who's just going all over the place. Vasilevskiy is still good fundamentally, but he also just has that, the physical upside of being able to move around. And Vasilevskiy absolutely will make some just incredible saves. And again, I think sometimes when you watch these two guys play, you might just think Vasilevskiy is playing better, even if they're both adding the same amount of value, just simply because of how they play different styles. But it should be very interesting, very fun to watch. And one other factor about Price is, I think this is a key, is that Carey Price has gotten a lot better at reacting to the puck. He used to kind of be the kind of guy that said, if you hit your spot, you're going to get a goal. It seems like he's improved at that later in his career of being able to react to a puck, which now means, and that's huge, quite frankly, because if you say, hey, you have to hit your spot to get a goal, well, Lightning players can hit their spots, so you are going to have to react at times, and he is capable of doing that. So now let's go over to Tampa Bay. We'll start with Tampa Bay, and then we'll go over to Montreal. You look at this forward group, and I mean, there's a lot of numbers here. So just so you guys know what the numbers mean, the column on the left, that's just how many points they have. Column on the right, that's how many goals they have. And, they're broken up into what their pairings are. So first line, second line, third line, fourth line. And the two key guys for Tampa Bay are absolutely Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov. I think you could argue that even though Kucherov has 7 more points with 27, which is an incredibly high amount, and in fact, the top 5 leading scorers in terms of points are all Tampa Bay players. So that's an interesting factor heading into this. Part of that was they scored 8 goals in one game, but still impressive. They also have played 1 more game, so that's also a factor. But, Point, the key stat that jumps out to me is Braden Point's 14 goals. I mean, 14 goals in 3 series is an insanely high number, and he has a chance to get the record. The record is 19. That does feel like it's an achievable record in hockey. Gretzky has made so many records unachievable, but there is a couple that are achievable. 19 goals seems possible, and if Point can, get 5 in the net, he can tie it. 6, he can take the lead, which is only a little bit above what his average has been to this point. The issue is he'll have to do it against Carey Price, so that can make it difficult. They also have Andre Palat, he's a good player. I mean, is he a first-line winger? Maybe you could argue he isn't, but he's still a good player and is kind of an underrated part of this Tampa Bay team. Their second line, I feel like very quietly, Alex Killorn and Steven Stamkos have put together really good postseasons. Both of them just shy of a point per game. If either of them gets 2 points next game, they'll be at a point per game. Both with 17, and both have put pucks in the back of the net too, which is an important factor. Is they're not just passing it to someone who's scoring; they're making plays, they're making stuff happen. And Anthony Cirelli, their second line center, he's someone who he's had his lows. I would say he's had moments where he's kind of disappeared, but he's really come alive, especially these past 2 games. He scored against in Game 6 against the Islanders, and then he set up the only goal in Game 7 against the Islanders. So he's come alive in a big way, and his speed was a huge factor in Game 5 as well, and part of what made that game such a blowout. Granted, everyone played well in that game, but he was a factor in that one as well. You also have their third line. This is what people talked about when they said, well, what changes did the Lightning make going into, from 2019 when they famously won 62 games and then got swept out of the first round. Well, they added Barclay Goodrow and Blake Coleman, and people talked about them being overpays, and they say, who cares? We got a Stanley Cup out of it. You can't overpay for a Stanley Cup. And they've both been good, and maybe they'll get a second Stanley Cup out of it, which would definitely make them not overpays. Because Barclay Goodrow, and again, the stats might not be incredible, but that doesn't really show the whole story. And Goodrow had an incredible Game 7. He did commit the one penalty, so that wasn't ideal, although they scored on it, so maybe it was ideal. But he had a key impact. He was the guy who was taking on, 4 Islanders players at one point. And you have Yanni Gourde, who scored the only goal in that game. Yanni Gourde, 6 points, but 5 of them goals. So he's getting the puck in the back of the net. Blake Coleman has not scored in the playoffs since the very first Lightning goal in the playoffs. So it's been a minute for him, but he's, a very good player as well. Did commit a costly error in Game 6 in overtime that gave up the game winner. So he might be looking for some redemption heading into the Stanley Cup final. You also have their third line, and this is an area where I would say Montreal has a clear advantage. I think I said third line, fourth line. Ross Colton, Tyler Johnson, and Pat Maroon. Tyler Johnson has had his moments. He certainly has. Tyler Johnson has, at times, shown that he is still fast and can still shoot at, occasionally well, but he's certainly not someone who's you're going to be stunned with, and he's not going to take over any games. Really, the way this fourth line tends to work is they get the puck in deep. Pat Maroon, tries to get it out, and just tries to throw it in front of the net to where someone could be there. Typically like Ross Colton shoots a goal there. That's what you hope happens. And it has some success, and for fourth line, it does its job, especially when these, top 9 guys are so deep that having just a competent fourth line this helps to add to that. Now, looking at their defensemen, you just see how deep they are. When it's like you talk about how great their forwards are, well, their defensemen are just as good. You have Victor Hedman with 16 points. Again, a lot of that is because their power play unit has been so strong, largely because of Kucherov. He's only put 1 in the back of the net. Actually, him and Ruda, only guys who have scored, and they both scored back-to-back in the same game. So that's kind of fun. Ruda, that's his only point. But again, he's competent offensively, and mostly he is their 6th defenseman, but he's with Victor Hedman, so that's kind of why you have him there, because they can play with each other. Also, Ryan McDonagh and Eric Cernak. I think both of these guys are kind of unsung heroes in a lot of ways, especially McDonagh. Cernak has surprisingly had 8 points. He's a very solid top 4 defenseman, although he is their 5th best defenseman. You have McDonagh, who is just incredible, and he is he should be a first pairing defenseman, but they have Victor Hedman, so they're going to have him go to the second pairing. And the fact that this team can have these guys out there for as many minutes as they do, it's just unfair. You're always dealing with Hedman or McDonagh practically, and even when you get both of them off the ice, the third pairing is Sergachev and David Savard. So it's like, well, now what do you do? I mean, this is an incredible third pairing. David Savard really came alive in that Islanders series, and I think Sergachev might be the one hope you have, maybe Ruda as well, but I feel like Sergachev, he's someone who, if you're a Canadiens fan, he will make the occasional mistake, and you hope that for Montreal as a team that has a tendency to make teams pay for their mistakes, you hope you can get him to make some mistakes there. But there's not a lot of holes in this roster, let's just be honest. It's a loaded team. It's one of the better teams we've seen in the salary cap era. Some people will say that, they haven't followed the salary cap, but we'll talk about that at the end a little. This is an incredibly loaded team. So how well does Montreal match up with them? Well, you look right here. Their numbers are not as good as Tampa Bay's numbers. They just aren't. I mean, you have Arturi Lehkonen, really this, Philip Deneau and Brendan Gallagher. Really this first line, I would say, is the one that has to pick it up. Now, Philip Deneau, and he had a great assist for Arturi Lehkonen, who, got the Game 6 winner to send them to the Stanley Cup Finals. So you hope that could be something there. But only 5 goals with your first line. You would like it to be a little bit better than that. You would. The good thing for Montreal, though, is that their second line on paper is really their first line. It's playing like it. You have 15 goals with those 3 guys. Tyler Toffoli, Nick Suzuki, and Cole Caulfield, who Suzuki had the Game 5 winner against Toronto. Him and Caulfield were the guys who were, had that 2-0, and it kind of makes you wonder if they don't score there, how much does this season change? Are the Toronto Maple Leafs in the Stanley Cup final? Is it the Vegas Golden Knights? Very interesting, but it is not. It is the Canadiens, and that's what they do, is they score under opportunities. There's plenty of times when it feels like, man, how did they win that game? But they can do that consistently. So it's not a fluke. That's kind of what they do, is they snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. You also have, for the third line, a very good third line as well. Paul Byron, Josh Anderson, and Jesperi Kotkaniemi. Kotkaniemi had the Game 6 winner against Toronto. So, a lot of you have a hero basically on all three of their top lines, and their fourth line is maybe kind of the best thing about this team in terms of just how they match up against Tampa. Obviously, it's not like they're going to play each other fourth line on fourth line, all game or anything like that. But you look at what they have, they're not scoring like fourth liners. In fact, they have just one less goal than their third line and more goals than their first line. And they've actually scored more points than any line other than their second line. So they're doing their job. And that's what makes Montreal so effective, is they can run out four lines. You have Eric Stahl, you have Joel Armia, and you have Corey Perry. And Corey Perry is the interesting one, right? Tampa Bay obviously beat Corey Perry last year in the Stanley Cup final. Corey Perry, though, had the Stars' last goal of the season. In Game 5, in overtime, Corey Perry put one in the back of the net, forced a Game 6. They got shut out of that Game 6, but he's someone who, he might not always be the most impactful. He's not going to score like a million goals or anything like that, but you're going to notice him. You're going to notice Corey Perry, for better or worse, whether it's him, hitting Braden Point in between the legs with his stick, or whether it's him putting a puck in the back of the net in Game 5 in overtime. He finds a way to make himself known. So, and it seems like he's, from what I've understood, Canadiens fans are saying he's kind of been pretty clean with them, so he still has his moments, but he hasn't gone over the line, which is, it's good to see, because having a guy like Corey Perry is fun as long as he's not injuring people. So a lot of interesting stuff there. I know the numbers aren't as strong as Tampa's, but what they do well is, again, they play very patient. They don't take a ton of chances. They don't play too aggressive. They don't put themselves in positions to fail. And when they have an opportunity, they make the most of it. And the same can be said for their defensemen, where you look down the line, you have Ben Sherratt, Shea Weber, that's their headliners. Sherratt, no points, but again, that doesn't tell the whole story, because this entire defensive unit has been really good, despite the fact that there isn't a ton of points. Only 18 total points in their entire defense unit. Again, keep in mind, Victor Hedman has 16 by himself, so that's how different these two teams play. Their second unit has been a bit more effective offensively. Joel Edmondson and Jeff Petrie, both of those guys combined for over 10 points. So there's that. You have Eric Gustafsson, who he's former Chicago player. He scored a goal, 3 points. John Merle yet to get on the point board as well, but again, what these guys do so well, and this is something that I'm not the biggest hockey expert in the world, but something that I notice is that the best defensive teams, they just seemingly always have two guys back. And maybe that's not the best way to phrase it, because it's stylistically it changes. But with their style, there's almost no odd man rushes. No matter what happens, there's almost no odd man rushes. So that means they're going to score less, but it also means they're going to give up less, which is how they've been able to be so successful. And it's how they've beaten teams that on paper should beat Montreal. So this is another team that on paper, the Lightning are better than Montreal. But Montreal has lost every series on paper, right? But they've won every series on the ice, and that's where the Stanley Cup final will be held. One thing that I also should mention is that they have no Thomas Tatar and no Jonathan Drouin. Tatar was their third leading point scorer with 30 points in the regular season. Meanwhile, Drouin, he's taken leave due to, I believe it's mental health. So, hopefully he does whatever he has to do to get better. I think anyone who, watches sports and is saying, oh, how dare he quit on the team, I think you're just the worst kind of person. I think that let him take care of himself. That's what matters. Hopefully things work out. It's unfortunate. You can say that, I wish he was able to play, because it would be a cool story, him playing against his former team. That would be fun, but, he's got to take care of himself. It is unfortunate. So that's interesting. They're kind of playing a little shorthanded here with a couple of their guys, but, hey, they're here, so why not win it all? A couple more stats. These are just full team stats to talk about. The Tampa Bay Lightning, they just score way more than Montreal does, and they've scored more than any team has this postseason. They scored 3.2 goals per game, and they give up just 2.1 goals per game. So they're scoring more than 1 goal per game more than they're giving up, which is a very high number. They're playing very well. Part of that is, again, the 8-0 game. That factors in. But even without that, their numbers would still be higher than Montreal, who scores 2.5 goals per game, and they give up 2.2. So they're almost like even. They're finding ways to win, though. They win a lot of 1-goal games. And, the stat that people talk about, Montreal, if they score just 2 goals, they win. It's a bit misleading because every game they've scored 2 goals in, they've scored 3 goals in, except for one. They won their first game of the playoffs 2-1. They haven't won any other game where they've scored 2 goals, so a bit misleading, but still kind of goes to show they find ways to win. And the special teams is another interesting factor here. So just so you know how this chart works is the number on the left, that's how well they perform on the power play. Second one is penalty kill, and third is just the two added together. You look at Tampa Bay, the way that they perform on the penalty kill is solid, 83%, and for Montreal, solid, 20.9%. So that's about, should work about both ways. But what's really fascinating is Tampa Bay, 37.7% scoring percentage on the power play, and Montreal hasn't allowed a power play goal in the last 30 penalties. That's 93.5%. So something seemingly has to give. I would bet that both give a little bit. You look at them added up, it's pretty similar. So special teams, this has been a massive advantage for both teams to get to this point. It will probably not be an advantage for either team at this point, which is kind of fun. Force teams to win on 5-on-5 without, I'm not saying don't call penalties. I'm just saying that's how this could work, which is, it's interesting. It's a lot of fun stats. It should be a very exciting series. Okay, so I moved the camera over a little because there's no more stats going to be on either side of me, so I can just talk about it. But there's a couple things I still want to talk about, one of which is this whole salary cap scandal that Tampa Bay is facing, right? Everyone keeps talking about. I'm sure that someone's probably wrote in the comments already that hasn't made it to this point in the video. They're $18 million over the cap, so it's unfair. That's true. The $18 million is true, but there's more to it than that. So I want to just explain it real quick if anyone doesn't know. It's been talked to death, but there still seemingly is a lot of misinformation about it. So hopefully I can clear up at least a little bit of it. So it is true that the Lightning are currently $18 million over the salary cap, but it is not true that the roster they're icing is $18 million over the salary cap. It's actually around $7 million over the salary cap, which is a significant difference, right? That's, the reason why that number is so different is because the Lightning made a trade where they got guys who were never going to be on the Lightning. They were never going to take play time for them, and they were basically just saying, we'll take on your contracts because you're not going to play. It's called Black Aces. So they were never going to play, and that's where a lot of that money comes from. So it's not that Tampa Bay is icing a team that's way over the roster. Now, some people will say, okay, sure, so it's not as bad as 18 million over, but still, 7 million over, that's kind of unfair. That shouldn't be allowed. And I do agree. And in fact, so did the Tampa Bay Lightning. So just to talk about the lore of this situation for a bit, in 2015, Chicago they were similarly over the cap. They were 7% over the cap. The Lightning are currently 8% over the cap. So almost identical. Chicago beat the Tampa Bay Lightning in the Stanley Cup final. The Lightning said, hey, shouldn't we fix this? They tried to fix it. They created a proposal. They voted against this loophole that the Tampa Bay Lightning are currently exploiting, and then the Montreal Canadiens, along with every other team but the St. Louis Blues, turned this down. They voted against it, or they voted for the loophole to still be in place. So if you want to be mad, I would almost say, be mad at the GMs who allowed this to take place, because the Lightning said, we are going to try to get rid of this. No one else let them get rid of it. So then they're saying, okay, well, then we're going to use it if you let us keep it. So that's what happened. And also worth mentioning, I think some people are acting like if the Lightning had to abide by the salary cap, that somehow Kucherov wouldn't be currently playing. That is just not true. What would happen is they would be losing Tyler Johnson and Eric Cernak, probably. That would be, maybe they find a way to only lose Tyler Johnson, but probably they lose both of those two guys, which matters. But again, we're talking about a fourth-line center and Tampa Bay's fifth best defenseman, realistically. So that is it matters, but how much does it matter? not as much as people are making it out to be. And I don't think it's, an excuse for any team. I really do think that the reality is, if Tampa Bay, had to abide by the salary cap, if this loophole wasn't closed, I think they're still here. And in fact, I think it's hard to argue that they wouldn't be still here. Also should be mentioned, and again, if you're someone who is still mad at the Lightning for this, I don't get it personally because it's part of the rules. Maybe it's just because of I mostly watch football where pretty much everyone celebrates when teams find ways around the salary cap, whereas in hockey that doesn't seem to be the culture, which I guess that's just part of me not fully understanding it. But still, one thing I have to bring up, and this is something I think it's a crazy conspiracy theory is what it is. The people that say that the Tampa Bay Lightning purposely sat out Nikita Kucherov and this was all some sort of elaborate ruse, that's just like there's no evidence whatsoever to back that up. The NHL monitors these situations. Nikita Kucherov did have surgery, and to the people that say, well, do you think he magically happened to get healthy game 1 of the playoffs? I don't. I think he wasn't 100% and came back not being 100%. Patrick Kane had the exact same situation with Chicago. He came back game 1 of the postseason, I think because he wanted to play in the postseason, and you'll play there when you're not 100%. You're not going to play at 85% in the regular season. But I could be wrong about, that, but at the same time, I don't see what the benefit would be. Tampa Bay could have afforded to have him play a couple games, so I don't see what the benefit would have been. So again, a lot of misinformation. Just want to clear some stuff up, and I gave my opinions as well. You can disagree with my opinions, I suppose, but at least don't disagree with the facts. And last thing to talk about, what's interesting is that Montreal actually has kind of a place in the Tampa Bay Lightning lore. The John Cooper era, the first time they made the playoffs was with John Cooper was 2014, and they got swept out of the first round against Montreal. And part of it was Ben Bishop was hurt, their starting goaltender at the time. They had Anders Lindback, who was not very good, so that factored in. But what made it more interesting was, a lot of people point to that being kind of when they had their, that's the moment that they kind of got the playoff success started, where they were able to realize, okay, this is how the postseason works. They were able to learn from it and grow from it. They ended up going to the Stanley Cup final in 2015. In one of those series, they beat Montreal in 6, actually went up 3-0, lost games 4 and 5, but then won game 6. So there's an interesting place in Lightning lore, and I think that kind of makes this even more fun, is that it's almost like Montreal, this whole run of terror has started with Montreal. So that's kind of another interesting tidbit. So yeah, it should be a very interesting series. I wish that Montreal was at 100%. It seems like they won't be, which is unfortunate, but they're still a very good team. I do say that the Tampa Bay Lightning are the better team. It feels like they should be favored, and they are favored. I do say Lightning in 6. That's what I'm going to say, but I mean, would anyone be shocked if Montreal can steal a couple games and win the series? I don't think so. And it even comes back to, again, talking a little bit more about lore with the Lightning in 2004, when they won their first Stanley Cup. They were actually a number 1 seed, playing a number 8 seed, Calgary, but Calgary still forced it to 7, nearly won. There was that game 6, was it in play? Marty St. Louis scores in double overtime, forces game 7, where the Lightning do win. So it could be a similar situation. And once you get to this point, there's no mistakes getting this far. Once you've made it this far, you're here for a reason, and it should be an incredible series. That's what I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are about anything I said, and let me know if you like these more, these hockey videos. I like talking hockey, so I'll make more if you guys like them. And if you don't, then I'll stop. That's fine too. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed it. And of course, as always, thanks for watching. Also, I just want to mention, if I'm a little bit flustered, maybe, talking a little bit quicker than usual, this is actually my second time recording this video, so I'm a little bit out of breath now. Just been talking for like an hour straight, so that's part of why. So always fun when you have to re-record a video because your microphone randomly stops working. But yeah, anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.